I didn't really care about my life. Like, I remember my mother and I having a serious conversation. And it was around the time my mother found my gun. My mother found my gun. Thankfully, she didn't turn me in. But she asked me, in Spanish, like, mijo, son, did you ever think about me? Peace and power. Welcome to Raw Success.
Peace.
First let me introduce us. This is Mack and Bonnet, and my name is True Khepra. And today, we are going to talk a little bit about me.
Yes.
Always remember, our intention is to empower you to be the best version of yourself.
Yes, sir.
Let's get it.
Sir.
What's going on, family?
Good, brother. Good. Yeah. I know we've been waiting to build on this. I know the people want to know exactly, just what brought you to where you're at. So I'm excited to, just hear. So
Wow.
I guess you could just start off by just telling us a little bit about, your journey and what brought you to this point now.
Man, that's wow, I don't even know where to begin. But what I will say, what brought me to where I am now is a sincere desire to do better in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to explain where that feeling came from. And I'm not trying to make myself sound special or anything like that. But I observed that not everybody has that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it came from. What I will tell you is that my mother, I'm primarily raised by my mother, who is an immigrant from Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And I watched her work very hard to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that I traveled. I've been traveling since a young boy, just being Dominican and moving around a lot. I lived in California, went to DR, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I used to spend the summers in New York with my cousins and my grandmother, may she rest in peace. And so I think that I also understood that this was a big world.
Yeah.
And I love where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew that wasn't just it.
Yeah.
However, I did fall into a life of crime, at a very young age. My mother raised me right.
Uh-huh.
I just gravitated towards that. The earliest memory that I can have of being attracted to that is when I was, I had to be about like maybe 8 or 9 years old or something like that. And there was this brother, Puerto Rican brother named G Money, who lived on Mill Street. He was the flyest dude on the block. He had a gold chain. This is going to sound super stereotypical, but he had a gold chain,
Uh-huh.
leather coat down to his ankles, and he was just fresh.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to be like him. And somehow I knew that he wasn't working a 9 to 5. Now, I didn't start my journey of hustling and, crime at that early. But the seeds were planted.
Uh-huh.
The environment played a crucial role. A lot of times we model what we see.
Yes.
And so I was just I'm a byproduct of where I'm from and what I was exposed to. At the same time, circumstances, growing up poor, and I know poor is relative. Like my poor is different than the poor in Dominican Republic, where the children don't even have shoes.
Yes.
And that's no exaggeration. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I struggled. I went through some things, and the resources around me were very limited. And so eventually I decided to do what was around me. And a lot of people call it easy money.
Yes.
Selling drugs isn't easy. There's a lot that you have to navigate through.
Like what? Elaborate.
We're talking about stick-up kids.
Uh-huh.
The obvious is cops. Making sure you have the right product. I mean, it's like a business. And, you were general manager at one time. You know, we spoke about that on one of the episodes. And, you know, I treated it like a business. So, you know, you got to re-up, you got to deal with the times of the prices. I mean, there's, you know, the droughts, you know, inventory, people getting you, the fiends trying to get you. I mean, all types of things. So it's not easy money. I can see why someone would think it's easy money, but it's not. So I eventually just fell into a life of crime, and I rose up to the ranks, you know.
What was pivotal in you changing that, you know, from a life of criminal activities to now you're a motivational speaker?
Yeah.
You have your book coming out. Like, that's a 180 in many ways. Was it something that happened, or what made you realize this isn't working, I want to change?
You know, I get that question asked a lot, because my transformation was so heavy. And these words can't even describe the transformation. Only people who really knew me, you know, like my man Culture, who's behind the board, would really know, because they saw me at my worst. So I would say there was a few things that happened that poured into that. But remember, I started this conversation saying that there's something in me.
Yeah.
So even during that journey, that's a manifestation of me wanting better. But the vehicle I chose was just a negative vehicle at the time, right? So, but to answer your question, because I know what you mean, knowledge of self. I joined the Nation of Gods and Earths, the 5% Nation. Huge, huge, pivotal moment. The self-awareness, what it exposed to. I mean, we can do a podcast strictly about that, right?
Yes.
But what I will say quickly, it made me realize that how I was living is not necessarily how I was supposed to be living. That there was more, that I have the potential to be a supreme man, that my nature was righteousness. And it also told me about some of the governmental plots and how involved they were, for example, in the design of infested our communities with drugs.
Yes.
And things of that nature. So being introduced to that truth, that awareness, opened my eyes up and made me realize, see, at the time, my name was Bloodshot. That was my street name. You know, back when I was selling cars, selling drugs and all of that. And I eventually became True. But it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't like I got knowledge of self and then all of a sudden, you know, that Monday I'm just righteous. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm 100% righteous. I'm still striving to the best of my ability, you know. So it wasn't like it was an overnight thing. What you're seeing now and hearing now is a byproduct of years of work on myself. Let me get back to your question. So the Nation of Gods and Earths, the second pivotal thing that happened in 1999 was the birth of my daughter, LaNasia. And that's important because I didn't want to repeat the same cycle that I saw going on around me in terms of men not being present in the household, men not raising their children. And I grew up without a father, so I know what that's like. And I didn't want to repeat that. And I understood. See, one thing about me, too, I was a realist. I understood that my fate was either death or jail. I understood that. And that there was a small percentage that I could make it out. And I didn't really care about my life. Like, I remember my mother and I having a serious conversation. And it was around the time my mother found my gun. My mother found my gun. Thankfully, she didn't turn me in. But she asked me, in Spanish, like, mijo, son, did you ever think about me? Well, let me press rewind a little bit. She asked me, like, son, what you doing? Why do you have this? And I said, Ma, the streets are real. I just, answered straight up, Ma, the streets are real.
Yeah.
And she was like, did you ever think about me?
Mm.
And I said, no. And, she asked me, some questions, do you love yourself and stuff like that? And I was like really questioning, do I really love myself? Because I was willing to die. I was willing to die. Like, sir, I'm not saying that to sound tough. I'm not into that, fam. Never was. I'm not into sounding tough and being tough and all. I'm just a man. That's it. And but I was willing to die. I was okay with that. But now I have a daughter who is relying on me, who in that stage of development needs me, who I'm responsible for.
Yes.
And I refuse to be a deadbeat father.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's disgusting. I think it's one of the worst things that's plaguing our community. I'm not with her mother anymore. I don't think things happen. Things happen, right? In relationships. That's no excuse not to be there for your children, no matter what.
100%.
And I know I'm going on a tangent about this. I'll finish this point. I know a lot of women make it difficult for men. Trust me, I know. Fight. Fight. That's all I gotta say. Fight. Don't let them win. Fight. So I would say that those two things, and there's one more that I'm thinking about it. I actually wrote about it in my book. I remember just observing the streets, and my man Shabazz and I, very good friend of mine, P. Shabazz, we're in the car, and we were having a conversation, really just observing the signs of the time, and they were becoming very violent. That's when the era where the Bloods were started to grow at a high rate in Patterson. And I know Bloods. There's no disrespect to them. But I started to see that things were becoming different.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so Shabazz and I were speaking about this. Shabazz and I used to hustle together. And I can say that publicly because he gave me permission to. He's in my book. And so we decided we didn't want to turn into the monsters that we would have to become, to get to the next level of things. Yeah. And that we would start making a plan and exit strategy to start, for lack of a better word, just leaving, that lifestyle behind.
Yeah.
But so those are three pivotal things. So you have the knowledge of self, you have the birth of my daughter, and you had that conversation that I had with Shabazz. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff in between that happens, you got shootouts, even Coach who's behind the board. He's been around during some violent episodes, that we went through. You got me catching charges.
Yes.
I was considered a delinquent juvenile by the time of age of 16. Was it 15 or 16? So there's a lot of stuff in between, a lot of pain.
Yes.
That happened, a lot of scary moments. All of this happening at the same time. But like I said, when you don't love yourself, and when you think that that's how you're supposed to be,
mm-hmm.
like, this is my life. I'm a street dude. That's what I identified as. So that's why the knowledge of self was so pivotal, because it gave me a new identity.
Yes. One thing, as I'm listening to you speak, that I see as an attribute of yours, which I think is a powerful attribute, is you have the ability to kind of see yourself outside of yourself.
Thank you.
Kind of like playing in a movie. Like you can kind of see where life is going. You see how you're acting, and you're not just living it, you're seeing it as well. And when you have that overview of it, you can make better decisions. So I don't know if that's something you've ever seen or an attribute that you ever noticed within yourself, but as you're speaking, I do see that is an attribute that you have, and I think it's a very powerful attribute in changing your life and in wanting to be more. So no, that's powerful, definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a quote, I believe it's by a Stoic. I love the Stoic philosophy. We're gonna get into Stoic philosophy. We got videos about the Stoic philosophy. I believe it's a life without self-reflection is a life not worth living. Something like that. Okay. But yes, I thank you for that acknowledgement. And but I do think that it's very important to self-reflect. And I think that one of my strengths, and I'm not perfect in this, I'm not a master, but I think most of the time I always look at myself. I came up with a system. It's called RACS. It's trademarked. The R, the first letter in RACS, stands for responsibility. And I think that I always, at least at a basic level, understood that I'm responsible. So when things happened, I looked at myself. Mm-hmm. I looked at myself. Yeah.
That's good.
And I understood that. That's why I always say, like, my mother raised me right. I chose the streets. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's symbolic that R, the first letter, is that, because that's what it starts at, with that accountability.
Yes.
Nothing will ever change without that. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the positioning of that acronym, but that's very insightful to have that as the beginning.
Thank you. And that was intentional.
Yeah, okay.
That was intentional.
Yeah.
I think that, too, like reading. So all I read, for the most part, all I read is nonfiction books too.
Uh-huh.
But you got books like The Alchemist that I love.
Yes.
That are fiction books.
Mm.
But I would say like 99.9% of the books I read are nonfiction. Mm-hmm. But I didn't start that way. So a funny story, when I used to live in Cali, so I got sent to California as it was like a form of punishment. My mother sent me there to go have a relationship with my dad, and also because she saw at a very early age that I was heading towards the wrong direction. So she sent me to Cali. And we, we'll touch on that story. I mean, listen, this is Raw Success. We're going to be talking about our stories all throughout our journey. But anyhow, as a form of punishment, when I would get in trouble in Cali, my stepmom at the time, Lupe, I love her so much, she introduced me to reading through punishment. So I would have to stay in the room. This is crazy. Like, it was like such a totally different life. Like, my mother never, go to your room. Like, that was like some white people stuff, you know what I'm saying? But when I was in Cali, like, that was my punishment, stay in the room. You had to stay in your room. And there was books. So eventually you just like, by the way, there's no TV. This ain't nowadays, you got a phone and all of that. Like, 4 walls. Like, it was like prison. And there were books. And so the first books I read, and I think that this is important, the first books I read were, I think they're called chapter books, where you would get to the end of the chapter and it would say, okay, if you want Billy, this is just an example, Billy to go to the store, go to page 28. If you want Billy to go to the forest and go for a walk, go to page 34. Right? It gave you options.
Yes.
And so those were the first books that I fell in love with. And so I think the reason why I'm bringing that up, I think that I developed an ability to compare myself to what was happening, in relation to what I was reading and what I was watching, because like I would watch shows like The Cosby Show and be like, damn, man, why can't I have a life like that? Why can't I have a father like that? Do people really live like that? What would I do if I had a family like that? And so I think that cultivating the power of imagination also helps with stuff, because you have to like sort of detach yourself and see yourself from a different angles, as well as draw up different possibilities and outcomes, just like the chapter books.
It's powerful.
Thank you.
It's powerful. Yeah, so I mean, that brings us to where you are now, and what's next then? Because I know you're always thinking in the future.
Absolutely.
So
While being present, of course.
yes,
When you play chess, they say you got to move 7 steps ahead of your opponent. Some people say 3 steps ahead. And depending on your skill level, determines your ability to move ahead. However, you got to be swift and changeable because your plan may not work out because it all depends on how your opponent moves, right?
yes,
So you also have to be present. What's next for me? Well, my book is coming out soon. And I have 3 more books in my mind.
okay,
Like literally all I have to do is sit in front of the laptop and type it out. And then we have this podcast. Speaking. And I'm thinking about going back to school.
oh,
Yeah, I'm thinking about going back to school for psychology.
wow,
I've always been interested in psychology. I mean, check out the books that I read.
yes,
You know what I'm saying? Like, no disrespect to psychologists, but I can hang with the best of them just on some self-study stuff. And it's actually the thing that I wanted to go to school for. But at the time when I finished high school, I went to Eastside High in Patterson. What up, Ghost? The adults around me was like, nah, man, ain't no jobs in that. Because at first it was social work. So I was going to go through psychology through social work first. But anyway, the adults around me would say like there's no jobs in that. And then when I saw, again, right, responsibility, I saw how long I had to go to school for at the time. And I was like, yeah, forget that. Let me get this 2-year degree and keep it moving. And so I am thinking about that. My wife is a therapist.
okay,
And we build on some things. And she's always reminding me, she was like, yo, you're needed in this space.
Yeah.
She would tell me. And I'm a life coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I can continue to contribute to people without becoming a psychologist or even their degree, you know, their institutional degree, whatever. But I think that just for me,
Yeah.
you know, I think just for me, I might want to pursue that eventually. But right now, man, it's about what we're doing right now, speaking directly to the people. I love this, man.
Yes.
It's like I enjoy doing this.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I just feel grateful that I have you as a co-host.
I appreciate
You know what I
it.
mean? Because you add on to the enjoyment.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Did I answer your question?
It did. It did.
Great.
So, I mean, you definitely left, room for a lot more stories. I know everyone. I want to hear more about, not just the street life, but also everything that happened after, and those stories in California and DR and just all over. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to build on that some more.
Of course.
But this was definitely a great teaser, so to speak,
Let's do it.
for us, for the listeners. So,
Yeah.
we appreciate it.
No doubt. If you like what you're hearing, smash what everybody says. Smash that like button. Press subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Listen, our purpose and mission in life is just to empower others. And like, we're serious about that. This ain't no fake guru, none of that stuff, man. We're just 2 brothers that love personal development, who are successful in our own right, in our own lives. And we want to just share the wealth. That's it. Press subscribe, tell a friend and tell a friend. Love. Peace.
Peace.